sponsored by Sue Minahan.
Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and her panel of guests bring you insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for soul growth. Come journey with us through astrology's energetic cycles and get ready to understand your path in the cosmic roots of the stars.
Hello, everybody. This is Talk Cosmos, and I'm very excited. The panel today is about the current happenings right now. It couldn't be more timely. It's U.S. global currents. And of course, we're looking at the inauguration tomorrow in the sense of how does that relate to our national involvement with the world, which of course we came from and we are part of. And it's a very, very special day too in so many ways. On the one hand, globally, we have the celebration of what appears to be a successful start with the exchange of people in the Middle East. And we're grateful for that. And on the other hand, we're also experiencing this transformation of leadership, which has to do with the people also, because we are of the people here in this nation of the United States. Let's get started with our panel, U.S. Global Currents. Thank you.
Examining significant United States domestic politics and foreign affairs through the astrological perspective of the celestial map of the sky to understand the impact on each individual around the globe, this is your U.S. Global Currents panel.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, founder of Talk Cosmos since 2018. I'm an evolutionary astrologer, consultant, speaker, writer, vibrational astrology student, Dwarf Planet University graduate, Kepler Astrology Toastmasters Club charter member. I have a fine arts music degree plus a certificate in jazz. I'm an artist, musician, and certified color energy life coach. Especially, I love mythology and esoteric philosophies.
I'm Robert Pizzetti, professional consulting astrologer and the visionary behind Deep Earth Astrology and the Deep Earth Astrology Tarot, a divination tool and teaching aid that integrates astrology, herbalism, and natural reverence. I specialize in vibrational and psychological techniques and infuse my practice with a deep connection to nature's spirituality. I'm currently the Grand Pendragon in the Ancient Order of Druids in America and the director of the Magus Gathering in Gore, Virginia.
I'm Justin Crockett-Elzy, an archetypal Jyotish astrologer, yoga and meditation teacher, and author. I combine both Western ancient astrology and modern psychological astrology with Eastern Vedic astrology, and I specialize in predictive, electional, and karmic astrology for individuals and couples. I also do in-depth astrological research into arcane astrological concepts, focusing on the mystical, occult side of astrology.
Rock musician Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention says,
"A mind is like a parachute. It doesn't work if it's not open."
Thank you.
Hi, guys.
Hi, Justin. Yeah. Hi, Rob.
Hey, how's it going?
Yeah, hi, Justin. It's good. It's good for myself and you guys. I mean, things, yes. Well, let's begin. U.S. Global Currents. For our audience, we have Justin Crockett-Elzy at his website, and you can reach him at justin.lc, that's ELZIE at gmail.com. And Rob Pizzetti is at deepearthastrology.com. And his email is deepearthastrology at gmail.com. I'm Sue Minahan at Talk Cosmos. We are scheduled always this third week, and lo and behold, what a day. Either today with Israel and Hamas having their ceasefire, which President Biden, thankfully, after 400 and some days, that's over a year of negotiations, managed to actually begin. Every little tree has a start, so we hope this continues. And then tomorrow, of course, is the inauguration. This generally is just a little bit of the outline. We are going to talk about both today and tomorrow's charts. And as with tomorrow's inauguration, what about Russia and what about our border countries. Always just a point to remind people, which next month we'll really focus on. This began with the Chiron return that the United States is experiencing. It's the fifth one, and it's a 50-year cycle, and it's about identity. And our identity could also extend, of course, into what is our role and how are we handling so much. Anyway, we'll talk about that next month, but just to let you know that there's an umbrella sort of for all of this. This is our inauguration chart for tomorrow. It's at noon. And if you have any.
Yeah, I mean, to me, an inauguration to me is a ritual. It's a national ritual. It's and when you have something going on during, a Chiron and Aries on your chart, I mean, as far as an initiation, I find always Aries is involved. Old wounds resurfacing, can we heal? Those themes kind of are omnipresent, And when I look at a ritual, I always look at the 12th and the 9th house, like those, there's this nature spirituality guru by the name of Nguyen who said, ritual is just poetry in acts. It's our actions and the poetry we create, and it's kind of weird this year. I mean, with it being indoors, we haven't seen that since Ronald Reagan. Why is it indoors? They said the cold, but is it a security issue? There's just a lot of things at play here. And, looking at that conjunction between Hygeia and Eris in the 12th house, looking at the conjunction between Mercury and Pallas, I mean, it's going to be a wild speech that is given, I would say, with that conjunction between Mercury and Pallas. And, I always find Pallas to kind of be, it can go either way. It's whatever decision that the hunt takes you.
The strategy, yes.
Yeah, and with that conjunction between Eris and Hygeia, like creating chaos to get to purity in the collective unconscious.
Oh, yes.
What are your thoughts on that, Justin?
Well, one thing that jumped out to me was, of course, is that Sun-Pluto conjunction in the 10th house, right on the midheaven. Of course, we know every year, I mean, not every year, but every inauguration, they start at noon. But I think what's interesting in the subjective portion of the chart, we see Mars and still retrograding in Cancer on the IC, and Jupiter also in the subjective below the horizon in the house of values. Retrograding. So I think that what's going on behind the scenes here underneath the surface is you've got this whole part of the collective, or at least half the collective, that's not really emotionally into this and still figuring out where they are fit emotionally, with Mars going retrograde on the IC. It's really deep seated emotions that are just not healthy around this. And then, of course, our values don't align. And, one part of the collective is okay with a certain amount of misogyny and racism. The other part's not. And that's
duality.
You see Jupiter retrograding in that second house of values. And I think, I definitely agree with you. It's going to be somewhat of a dominating, dictatorial, autocratic speech because Mercury's up there in Capricorn. And I think it's interesting because the Sun-Pluto conjunction 10th house tells me that the mask, or how the world will see us, will change with Pluto's Sun conjunction and Aquarius. So that's what really jumps out to me about this chart.
Yeah, and I look at the 11th house, and when we're looking at it from a psychological standpoint, we're talking about community. But when we're looking at it from a mundane standpoint, that usually represents government agencies. And when we're looking at the 11th house, there, the North Node and conjunct Neptune in Pisces, like that just screams to me like a confused destiny, not knowing where things are going to go. And then you also have, the Venus Saturn there, like, that necessarily isn't, a bad thing, but it's a restriction of values,
right? Right. And, I might note, we don't see it on this chart, but I like what you were talking about when you talked about what's assigned to each of the houses, like that 11th house is government. Well, what's interesting later on, when maybe we'll see this, but the 9th house is of course, the judiciary.
Yes.
And this
Yes.
year, the South Node in Virgo, which is all about purification and purging, is going to, in the Sibley chart, the 9th house of the judiciary of the United States. So there's going to be some really turnover in that. So when we're talking about assigning houses, that, like you said, 11th house is the government, the 9th house is the judiciary. Those are really kind of important, I think, to pay attention to.
I agree. And I think that one thing that he is going to talk about is reforming the judiciary. And you can see that with that conjunction between Pallas and Mercury, and being in Capricorn about structures, like definitely, like, he is going to have a new vision of how the judiciary should work. He's going to bring up grievances of the judiciary. Like, come on, that's not like a shot in the dark there, and I do think that we're going to see a weaponization of the judiciary as being a theme throughout his presidency in this second term.
Yeah.
Well, it is interesting to have Uranus, which is a modern ruler, which, as an evolutionary astrologer, I definitely look at ruling that Sun and Pluto in the first house. It's in a strong, it's at the last, it's still in the last decan of Taurus and retrograde. So it has a ways to go until July when it changes signs, but that's significant and very unsettling. Uranus is everything that we know about the immediate moment that can change things. It has a lot to do about nature, of course, and it has and set values as far as, in a fixed sign. Yeah. But having that Sun and Pluto, I mean, everything that you both brought up is so appropriate. It's incredible to realize that.
And that we can't ignore Chiron opposite the moon.
What
I mean? Like,
Thank you.
I mean, the moon is in the 6th house. That's our day-to-day operations. That's it's the public, it's the worker, it's also health, like the moon striving for balance in Libra, the moon striving for justice for the worker, with this wound in the 12th house, which in my opinion represents the collective unconscious. This, how do we fit into anything anymore? How do we bring ourselves into balance for these tumultuous times? There's no one that's happy right now. Okay. Like,
well, And just on top of that same theme, I'm glad you brought it up, is that Uranus-Juno opposition.
Yeah.
Because if you looked at the Aries ingress from this last year, that Uranus was opposite that. It was actually in the 7th house of the castle, the White House, and that was why there was a change. Was Uranus was on the Aries ingress was in the 7th house. Now it's opposite, and so there's this aspect of the opposition here. I think this kind of represents some of the opposition. Uranus here is that it's still retrograding. So it will be interesting to see what happens, and see it's opposite of who owns the castle. The 7th house is considered, if we're looking at mundane astrology, the White House, the who holds that, and that is right now Juno and Scorpio.
Right. And what's the partnerships? Thank you for bringing that up. I love that, because Juno represents what we're married to, our alliances. And in Scorpio, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's like, who really has the wealth, the jewels that we're exchanging on one level, I suppose. Anyway. Well, okay.
I think that was a good rundown of that chart.
Yeah.
Right. You both got good points about it. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
And looking at the inauguration with our Sibley chart, there's others that all are valid, but it is the mainstream 5:10 p.m. on July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia, the capital at the time. It has various aspects, and I tried to highlight a few. One was, of course, the moon. If we look at that as, again, the public, it's conjunct for sobriety and also for limitation or for grounding, however we want to look at it, with Saturn. That's in negotiating Libra. And then, of course, we have that conjunction, which we brought out, which is so solid. And the first time ever that Pluto has been in Aquarius for one of our inaugurations, because it is a 250-year cycle. And then, of course, we have these other transits on the right side of the chart with Mars exact with, our actions, motivated drive with our thought process in cautious, caring, home, idea, emotional Cancer. Besides the fact of Jupiter.
Yeah,
Yes.
that, I look at the Jupiter Uranus and I see it in the sixth house. That to me, especially in Gemini, is, radicalization. Rebellion, seeds of radicalization. Not saying on either side. I'm just saying that is kind of going to be a theme here, where both sides are getting these big instant thoughts about how we should be communicating with each other, and that is, that can be very powerful. I would say that it's very American in some ways, So, I mean, yeah, and then, obviously we have, that going back to that conjunction between the Sun and Pluto. I mean, that can be, especially in the second house of values and, what we're thinking. I mean, and it's going to be an extraordinary evolving and changing time, and I think that it's going to be very much a game of oligarchy versus people.
Yeah, because government.
I agree, and that anytime Pluto hits Ketu, the South Node, that is rebirth, that is change. And being it's in the second house, our country's taken a different, what the liberal democracy was before, the values are going to change. The country's going inward. It's like, the oligarchy, like you said, is happening. Our government is no longer going to be what it looked like as we were all growing up. It's going to change. And I think I liked how you pointed out the communication aspect, that Mars, Mercury, that actually has, if you look at the deacons there, that actually is ruled by Neptune and Jupiter. So that just gives that Jupiterian energy to it, expanding of that the motions of communications and direction, and the collective planet Neptune. And then, of course, if you look at that, as you pointed out, Robert, the Uranus Jupiter is in the deacons is ruled by Mars and Mercury. So there's all that arguing and communication dynamics, which I think is going to get larger.
And just to back you up on that even further, I mean, I view Cancer as a very tribal sign. It's very much about the tribe. It's about how we feel about our own tribe. And there is so much tribalism going on in our country right now. And for there to be a conjunction between a retrograde Mars and a Mercury, like reviewing, how we've acted according to the tribe, and then assigning communication to that, like with that combination of the Uranus and Jupiter in Gemini, that is, it can be very, very powerful, and it could be a lot of like reaction.
Right. And I'll just point one thing. And onto that point, the tribe, then that just then takes me back to Chiron, which is in the fourth house of home, tribe, and family.
Yes.
And there's this whole wound in the collective, going back to our prior shows, how Chiron is about who belongs and who doesn't belong.
Yes.
And this is going to be a focus back on individuals and families of who belongs, which tribe belongs here, which doesn't, with that Chiron in fourth house.
So much thinking. I noticed too. Look at opposition with transiting Mercury. It's applying, within what, 6 degrees of an exact opposition to that, from first house to eighth house, right? Meaning that so much of this, and then also with that Jupiter opposing our natal ascendant. So bringing in all these ideas, recalibrating our whole belief systems, but not a set. It's all mercurial. It's all cardinal. It's all breaking up, acting.
Yeah. I mean, listen, the Sibley chart is a Sag rising. I mean, and like that's the truth. And just looking at where Jupiter is, I mean, I think it confirms all of our thoughts on this. Like it's definitely going to be an instinctual time of big deliberate acts of communication.
Well, here we go. Here's the first one as of today. The ceasefire prisoner exchange, that nip and tuck, but it did occur. And they are, as we've seen in the news, home. And how the food now gets to Gaza, we'll find out too. And thankfully, there's other charts here to see. This is with the United States. It's as of the natal chart on the inside. On the outside, at 9 o'clock, I was toying with what was the chart, but 9 o'clock, it wasn't 8, kind of was 8:30 their time. It was supposed to, but this is close enough. And it shows that the moon is so close to our MC. I mean, it's within minutes. It could be exact, but who knows what our original chart was anyway. And then again, going over to Mars as action that we'd already brought up, that it's exact. Mm-hmm.
I would be remiss not to bring up the TikTok thing here. And the reason why is because this is a comparison of the US to this conflict. And many people were receiving their information that was not going through the propaganda filter through TikTok, especially those that were supporting, the Palestinians. That was very much a connection point for people to receive news about, because it was not being put through the US filter. And one thing that Chris Brennan pointed out that I thought was interesting was that exactly 8 years ago at the star point is when when Vine was canceled, which was a very similar thing that was going on where, so I mean, when we see that Mars Mercury conjunction there, I mean, I definitely think that that's about tribal communication, seeing that through, and, having this Venus pattern repeat itself as far as methods of receiving information being shut down. I just think that it's very interesting time. And then MC on with the moon. I mean, that
Right. And then you look at the sun, which was and is today still in Capricorn, which is in sign conjunct to the natal Pluto. But then again, look at the 6th house there, just to land people, with Uranus on Vesta of our hearth. And when you bring up the breaking of the pattern, which Uranus does, it would indicate perhaps another side of that communication breakdown on a daily basis. 6th house, Justin.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty much almost like what we just saw, only with a little bit of a different context. I really don't have really much to say about it.
Good thoughts there, Rob, about thank you, Justin. We'll go on. We have a couple more. We have a little bit of time just to finish up this, because this is Israel. And granted, it's just to see a little bit of significance. I did bring up some on the right. I didn't change but there, look at on the 1st house, Chiron, the natal Chiron, which is in their 1st house, which you would think back in 1948, of course, after World War II, is a very strong feature of the changing identity of healing. But here we have Juno of marriage and relationships, uniting with it, and it's opposing the Sun and Uranus. So it is. And in vibrational astrology, which Rob and I are studying, we might just indicate that the interpretation of Uranus, along with what mainstream thinks, is the current moment. So it's right now, which can be fragile. Things change. But
and I think, I was going to say, and I think this chart really shows you also what is the outcome, because we're still in an evolving situation here. What is the outcome of this? And I might point out that in about 2 years, right in June of 2027, that south node is going to go over the Pluto of Israel. in the 10th house in 2 years. So there is going to be a change in the country of Israel right around, especially inflection point of June of 2027, when that south node, and like the U.S. is going through a south, Pluto on the south node. Well, of course, then the south node will be on the Israel Pluto in the 10th house, which is how they're seen to the world. And I think that that's interesting that this chart shows with all that Leo in the 10th house for the country, and that south node being the next major transit through that. There's going to be some way and how this changes Israel, this whole war with this particular one.
Yeah. And I think the most important thing to recognize is that when we look at the Israel chart and we look at the U.S. chart, and there are conjunctions between Venus and Jupiter, between the two of us. When they prosper, we prosper. When we prosper, they prosper.
It's a strong chart.
It is a strong relationship between the Israel and the U.S. chart. So I actually see this as a good thing. I'm glad that this ceasefire has taken place, obviously, but I think that it happening technically under Biden's watch and not as much of a military aggressiveness that Trump was going to push for in terms of dealing with this situation was ultimately a good thing for the American people.
And speaking about that relationship, which thank you for switching the charts here. This one, I would point out that the south node of even though it includes the Davison chart, I was hoping we could actually get Israel with U.S. like you're pointing out, but the fact that the south or the Saturn, USA Saturn, is on that south node for Israel, it just shows that the United States is the daddy here, the daddy, the parent for Israel here with this. And it's interesting also how our Mars is on that Chiron for the country, and it's almost like, so we helped fight them, but fight for them in a way, by blocking all those missiles out, so that's, I find that interesting how you're right. There is a strong connection with the Mars Chiron, and then of course our Chiron with their north node. And that to me tells me that just because there's been this ceasefire and U.S. has that Chiron there of what tribes belong that don't, that I don't think that they would open up any Palestinians. I think there's still this Chiron of, within the U.S. of a strong Israel bent versus Palestinian.
Yeah.
And so there's a tribal thing going on down there with that north node in Chiron.
To me, it's very healing on both sides. I was looking at this a lot, thinking what heals them heals us, and what heals us heals them. In a sense, there's this, because, and I tried to put like the pink there rather than red, but still pink, meaning if we look at that, this is a bi-wheel, of course, and it's the U.S. natal chart on the inside. On the outside is a Davidson, which actually can be, it's not just a midpoint, it's where that can be progressed and whatnot. And I chose the natal with the ceasefire to try to get what's the meaning for Israel with that interpretation, and see if there's a connection. And what I see is this other aspect called point of Thales. And I know with archetypal symbols, which Justin is part of, which we're going to have next week, we go over that a lot. It's a deal where there's an opposition. Notice that the nodes, of course, are opposite with, but there's another set, and in this case, set of planets that are either trine or sextile, and that's the focus. And it's very much a resolution, and that would be the Chiron with the Mars. So I'm glad that all that, I'm hopeful. But the other thing is, just before I end here, look at the duality with Mercury. As you say, we are this daddy type negotiator through the mental aspects, because it's aligned with both the midheaven of the U.S. and our Mercury with their ascendant. I almost did a flip chart on it, but we have to eventually end and go to our break.
I think you guys covered everything that I thought about this, so that's great. But I mean, my main thought about this is I certainly do not mind the conjunction between the MC and Mercury in Libra. I mean, at least we're talking about justice. At least we're talking about balance. Whether that holds I think the chart can be a little ambiguous, but I mean, the concept right now is getting to some kind of balancing effort.
I would say the dark aspect here, and I got to bring
Mhm.
this out because there's two, duality here, is that I think that both countries are dealing with a certain amount of tribalism issues
Yeah.
and
Granted.
racism, especially with the Chiron North Node and Eris down there. That that Israel is learning some aspects just like the U.S. is here.
It needs to be inclusive. Yes, absolutely. There's always that inclusive. Thank you, Justin and Rob. That's Justin Elsie and Rob Passetti. And this is Talk Cosmos, U.S. Global Currents. We'll be right back, okay? Stay with us. Thanks.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Aquarius, ruled modernly by Uranus and Saturn in traditional astrology by the ancients. By leaving a cycle based on governing structures through both man-made and universal laws, Aquarius breaks established patterns, permitting the energy of freedom, just as its ruling planet Uranus spins on its side and orbits backwards. As a fixed air sign represented by the water bearer pouring the spirit of cosmic energy, Aquarius seeks to find like-minded, intuitively aligned souls to connect in social groups for the elevation and improvement of all.
Talk Cosmos brings insightful conversations to awaken consciousness for the soul growth with hour-long programs. Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel and Facebook page. While you're there, make sure you click the like and subscribe buttons so you get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. And to find out about upcoming programs, sign up for the newsletter at talkcosmos.com. So grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
This is Martha Norwalk. Every Sunday morning, beginning at 9 a.m., thanks in part to the Ananda Institute of Living Yoga, we cover the world of animals. This week, January 19th, it's Behavior Training and Healing Sunday with me, and talk with your human or animal loved ones on this side or the other, feng shui, astrology, and personal awareness coaching with Natasha Venter. Hope you can join us and plan to call in with your questions for either one of us or a personal reading with Natasha. Martha Norwalk's Animal World, Sunday morning, 9 a.m. to noon, right here on Alternative Talk, AM 1150.
Make us part of your daily routine. Alternative Talk 1150.
Hi, we're back. This is an astrological perspective of our current events. And just to remind folks, we have our panel here with Robert Passetti of deepearthastrology.com and Justin Crockett Elsie with JustinCrockettElsie.com. And you can find Justin, who's an archetypal Yodish astrologer. He's a consultant, does workshops. He's a teacher, an author, and he's on Instagram. That's Astrological Yogi, and also on YouTube at Justin Tiger. So this is great, and he has many, many different factors. And you can also contact him. He does Zoom consultations, which I think we all do, but it's a big feature. So shall I go on, Justin? Are you okay? Okay. And then we have Rob Passetti at Deep Earth Astrology. And Rob is also a consultant. You can get him at deepearthastrology@gmail.com. And he is about sometime or other going to unveil his tarot.
Yes. Yeah, we're excited. We're coming through with that now. Like we've sent it out to the printer. We're working on everything. It's a process. It's an arduous process, and
Do you
with
have
all of
pre-orders?
we will. We'll when we get a good
let
idea
us
of
know
what we
next
want.
month.
Yeah, for
That's-
sure. Yeah.
Is there any other event coming up? Like
Yeah, we're actually doing the Magis Gathering in Gore, Virginia, and that's in May. That is very it's called this year's theme is called the Music of the Spheres. It is all going to be about the connection between astrology and nature spirituality, and that's happening in Gore, Virginia. You can go to Magus, MAGUS gathering.org, And then we're about to actually unveil the first iteration of our Fractal Cosmos gathering, which is going to be a vibrational astrology online conference that following weekend over Labor Day weekend. So
Will
I
that be
mean,
this year or next year?
that's going to be this year. So it's just
Okay.
just a couple of months. We're excited.
Yes, indeed. And we'll get those links for people next time.
Yeah.
And it will be very exciting. Well, thank you. We're okay. And myself, if you haven't checked our playlist or if you haven't followed, it might be very easy to do that. And it will be easy, but we have a special year focus because we're still just entering the year. Archetypal Symbols did a marvelous one. Vibrational astrology, which Justin's on that one, and Rob's on the winter solstice vibrations with Linda Barry, and that has about the whole season. It's very strong. And then again, we have Astrojam, a totally different, unique, which both of them are on. I mean, and that was a different way about the Aries point and the Libra, which gives another perspective of the United States, not United States, the world. And of course, there is this year with the moon phases and then again the nodes. So there you go. Thank you so much. Let's look a little bit. I just tried to focus people, but we're going to talk a bit about NATO, Ukraine with its conflict with Russia, and not necessarily China. I should have taken that off, which is happening, but it'll go on. And Canada and Mexico. Here we have the U.S. on the inside and NATO on the outside. NATO, I know, has been quite concerned with different events because of conflicts with elections. There was one in Romania that was evident. I don't know if that's something. Go ahead.
So, I wanted to point out one thing on that last chart we were looking at that I forgot to back up. No, you don't have to go back to it.
Okay.
But to back up something that was also on top of what Robert was saying with the Mars Chiron conjunction in Gemini there. I had written down earlier, that's interference. So it's like we interfere. The Mars, Chiron, and Gemini interfere in each other's affairs, but also speaking for each other in a certain way. But here, it's interesting with this. Two things that really jumped out with me, that this is a long-term relationship, that no matter what happens, I think this is a little bit like the Israel-U.S. chart, that the NATO-U.S. chart, even though there's dynamics here with change, I think there's still a long-term relationship because of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the top. And of course, the South Node is close there as well. And then I do feel that based on some transits that we know that Pluto currently ends in Aquarius, that means that it's the transiting Pluto is going to go over the NATO Jupiter in Aquarius. So I think that we're going to still see it, and that's part of that growth, brought in more countries. But I think that even though the U.S. is kind of, iffy about it, I think there's still going to be a lot of changes with Pluto going over the Jupiter for NATO.
Absolutely. Good point, with whole perspective of foundational beliefs. But look also at the sixth house, just to throw in for you both. I noticed that NATO has their Juno in Gemini. Of course, we know that's duality, and as we've spoken, and with our Uranus, it's trying that.
I think what we're looking here is, just to back up what Justin said, is this is a long-term relationship, and we look at our Saturn there in the 10th house, and have that kind of that Neptunian influence of NATO. Saturn is exalted in Libra. It loves to be in Libra. It's all about justice, about being a balanced adjudicator, being fair. It's very much a judging thing. And NATO, because of these relationships that we have with NATO, sometimes that's had to be clouded. Maybe we've had to get involved with many things with NATO that may have been out of our purview, and then seeing that, what does that have to do with? We essentially have the Chiron of NATO on top of our ascendant. Like we're constantly in this place where we are dealing with sovereignty and initiation of nations and their ability to protect themselves. And that Neptune on top of our Saturn in Libra in the 10th house is really just kind of like, it's made things, I don't think it's made things easier. Let's just say that.
Well, it is, in a sense, it's the whole, but I'm looking back again, remembering about transiting Pluto at 0 degrees, which, has been hovering back and forth which is a slow moving planet, but trining that 6th house Juno, because I'm realizing, yes, indeed, we are involved in a long-term relationship, but it's moving parts. Hopefully with Pluto in networking, community-based Aquarius, we might expand that. Wouldn't that be great?
And I mean, you look at the 2nd house and you see, the Pluto conjunct the Jupiter there. I mean, Pluto in Capricorn is very much about, revising structures in the world. And, that Jupiter in Aquarius, NATO has expanded our role as that kind of Plutonian and Capricorn figure to bring our version of structure to the rest of the world.
That goes back to the Chiron, a return that we're doing. Thank you, because I'm realizing. Do you have more, Justin, or should I go to the next?
Well, no, I was going to say, when we think about transits coming up, remember I mentioned in 2 years that South Node, it will be in Leo going over Israel's Pluto. Well, look at that. Then in 2 years' time, also in 2027, the South Node will be going over the Pluto in Leo of the NATO.
Oh, yes.
And at the same time, hitting the U.S.'s North Node right around that time. So something very important about 2 years from now in the world. This could mean, I'm not saying it could be a war because it's Leo, but there's definitely going to be something dynamic when that South Node gets to Leo.
Well, it's North Node for us because
but it's Pluto for the NATO. Because they have Pluto and when the South Node goes over to Pluto.
Oh yes.
The South Node transiting South Node in Leo in 2 years will go over the Pluto of NATO. And
that's
then, of
right.
course,
that's right. Yeah, for us, it's a reverse nodal return.
Half nodal return, right?
Yeah, and for them, thank you. Okay. Here we have Ukraine on the inside. That was December 1st, 1991, 6 p.m. This is according to Champion.
There's not that much difference between these charts, just due to the brevity of the amount of time. We're talking about, less than a month.
No, it's not. It's exactly.
I think the biggest thing, though, is you can look at the flavor of each of these nations based off of the Eris and the Hygeia. You see that Ukraine is going to have, much more of an Eris, like having to be a discordian and fight, whereas Russia is going to be more worried about its purity and the Tauresian sense of abundance within self, the land, the motherland, versus Ukraine, who is always going to be in this position where, let's get back to basics. Aries is the warrior, like they're going to have to be fighting and be discordant through this relationship. And that is just, we've seen it through Crimea. We've seen it now through what's happening in the world right now, and I just don't think that is ever going to change in their dynamic. Is one worried about the motherland and one worried about being free of the motherland?
There are similarities that just are okay. I'm looking.
I want to say one other thing about this here. Just think about transits. As soon as Mars goes direct, it's going to go. It's already gone over that South Node, so we're maybe ought to really pay attention to Mars direct, even though it's already past that degree. But Mars direct when it comes to what's going to happen, and then of course later, our next year, our end of this year, into next year, that South Node will go over the Jupiter. So it'll be interesting. I think we're going to see a delay here and something happen a little bit later on when that South Node gets to their Jupiter in Virgo.
Yeah, I was looking. That's all excellent. Looking at the relationship, though, I'm thinking in the 7th house. Look at how Russia is Saturn right on top of their, Juno of relationships. And then you go down to the 5th house and you see that Ceres, which is really about food also, Ceres can be, besides grief and nurturing, is food, is right on top of their, on top of, it's conjunct, thank you, 24 degrees with their Mercury, and in Sagittarius of moving ahead and broadening. Just thinking of those relationships that, begin to, well, okay, the dynamics are integral, aren't they? Yes. Yeah, and I appreciate that business about, okay, going on to the next, we have Ukraine on the inside again, with here our United States chart as of tomorrow, the inauguration, to see how perhaps the United States is influencing or being in relationship with it.
That Hygeia jumps out to me again. That Uranus on Hygeia, from a massive political standpoint, I would view Hygeia as kind of national purity, kind of a national identity, getting to the
11th house.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, 11th house, getting, I have no doubt that this is going to be this new administration is going to be a Uranian figure on top of that.
Yeah. They're going to hang them out to dry. And that I see that with the Chiron, the U.S. Chiron on Eris, there's a disruption and tension. And I just don't, this chart just doesn't show me that there's going to be the support there. They're going to hang them out to dry.
Well, I'm worried about Pluto in the 6th house just before it's entering and of course, this is Porphyry. For those people that care about where the houses, where the planets are on the houses, but it's right at the angle there in the 6th house, conjunct applying, going over their natal Saturn.
And Juno. Juno's right
and
there.
Juno,
too.
Yes, indeed.
Change
so
of relationship.
A lot of change, power structures of.
Listen,
but look at the moon.
We can't ignore the Pluto on top of the Saturn. I mean,
that's it. That's what I'm saying.
And Juno's right there. The relationship is.
It's just like, I think it's pretty obvious that how this is going to go. There might be some yip yapping going on about a little bit of delusion, but we can see from this chart how this is really going to.
And look at the other Juno at the bottom is on their.
Oh yes,
Pluto.
Exactly. A parallel, a double signature.
The relationship's going to change.
That's right.
I mean,
and although the moons, look at that moon. They're both. It's like a moon return of the public. So that's our public and their public. It's in Libra. It's very fascinating that way.
Going back to that 11th house, though, I mean, you're talking about, I think this looks like almost like a betrayal, like that big Gemini energy in the 11th house, a lot of big words, a lot of big communication. But at the end of the day, it's going to be that Taurus Uranus, that kind of wrench into the resources, wrench into the abundance, land, and the things we've been giving them. We've been giving them a lot of things, and it's helped support their national identity with the Hygeia, and we're just going to screw that up.
Well, Mars is in opposition, as we know, for some time, and I think later the next exact, there's 3 of them. I forget if it's in February or if it's at the end of this month. All the details. It wouldn't be at the end of this month because it's still in Cancer, so it must be next month where it goes, because there's other factors. Okay, we'll go on. Thank you. Have we finished that? Shall we go on?
Let's finish. We got Canada and Mexico.
Okay. Yeah. Canada, our border countries here now, across the oceans, back to our national interest with our borders. This is Canada on the inside, which was July 1st, 1867 at midnight in Ottawa, Canada. And of course, tomorrow at noon and the East Coast in Washington.
So back to where Robert's going with this theme. Look at the Pluto on the Hygeia. This relationship's going to change as well. The United States, and it's because we see the South Node is on the Juno, and the Pluto on the Hygeia. This relationship is going to change, and maybe not necessarily. It's going to become a little bit more tension.
Chiron on the ascendant. We've already seen us trying to make them question their own sovereignty as a nation.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Their
like
identity.
Their identity, and we're just bringing like that nasty. It's like we're making our problems their problems now. You know, like we're not happy enough with having it.
It's opposing the moon too, isn't it? The public, which is in the 7th house, it just wants balance and equity.
And the moon in mundane astrology represents women, children, the people, the most vulnerable of the nation, and they're looking at this like, I don't want to be a part of this mess,
No. And look at Canada's about ready to have an opposite or a half nodal return next year or later this year, with it going over their North Node in Juno. So this tells me that Canada is going to be at an inflection point and change with their relationship and not maybe just the United States, but in many ways relationship wise and generally.
Yeah. It's all there.
Looking at exactly down there in the 3rd house of communication, as it's circled there with transiting Jupiter, tomorrow transiting Jupiter, applying to their Venus, which is of diversity. They're French and they're English speaking, declared as a nation, and yet we're bringing in.
I mean, this could lead to me. This could mean to me that Canada is going to probably maybe go a little bit right on this. You know what I mean? Like us bringing our big words into their general Gemini Venus vibe. Gemini Venus likes to explore a lot of different things, and I think we're going to definitely see that exploration of them, seeing how can we navigate this situation within our own political discourse to keep away this giant expanding influence that we have of not just the politicians but the oligarchs as well.
And it's trying that Venus is trying that moon as in the 7th house of our inauguration. So
and of course Neptune's on their Chiron right now too. So there's so just like that misinformation and delusion within the collective is affecting them just as much.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, we hope Canada and the United States remains.
We wish you well, Canada.
Yes, we do.
I love Canada.
I love Canada too.
Oh, look at that in the 8th house with Juno with Ceres. Yep. And of course, and it's opposing with that, of change of idea of the moment. So we will, Mexico, our other border. Now, here we have Mars as of the inauguration in their 1st house in Cancer, which has everything to do with emotional and tribal and security and caution.
And it's retrograding. So that's kind of like the Chiron on the ascendant for Canada. Mars retrograding with questioning tribalism and who belongs to
Justin, I realized 17 degrees Cancer was exactly at the flashpoint of the retrograde of Mars. See the ascendant? Yes, just to confirm what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty obvious to me what that means. I mean, we're going to be getting rid of a lot of the Mexican citizens that live in this country, and we're going to be putting action towards sending them back to their own tribe. I mean, that's the attitude that the U.S. is going to have.
Well, and to your point, back to Hygeia's relationship here, the Chiron Hygeia conjunction right now is on their so the energy coming from this inauguration is a wound on their growth of their sense of self with Jupiter and Aries in midheaven there.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, Ceres in the 8th house, which is just gone direct, is nurturing and healing. We can only hope that with the Aquarian sun that we find some kind of sense of community, yes? Because we have to end this.
I think the main theme is identity and tribalism.
Yeah.
I agree.
Well, thank you, Justin Crockett Elsie and Robert J. Passetti. It's been a delight. I look forward to next month, and we will experience and navigate these times together. It is community. Build what you can, folks, with the people close, and have faith of your heart. Yes?
Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you. Bye.
Blessings to all.
Thank you for joining an insightful conversation on Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Minahan and her panel of guests awaken consciousness by connecting soul growth patterns with astrology's energetic cycles. Be sure to tune in next week, same time, same place, to continue your journey through the roots of the cosmic pathway.